Jack Dawson tightened the strap on his backpack and glanced up at the thick canopy of trees overhead. The jungle was alive with sounds, chirping birds, buzzing insects, and the occasional rustle of leaves as unseen creatures moved through the underbrush. He had always loved moments like this, where the world felt vast and untamed. As a wildlife photographer, Jack spent most of his days chasing elusive animals and capturing their beauty through his lens. But this trip was different. This time, he wasn't just looking for pictures. He was searching for something rare, something that might set him apart from other photographers. The map in his hand showed a region marked only as unexplored. It was a vague label, but it was enough to spark Jack's curiosity. Few people ventured this deep into the Amazon, and even fewer returned with stories worth sharing. That was exactly why he had chosen this spot. If there was one thing Jack believed, it was that the best discoveries came when you stepped off the beaten path. For hours, he trudged through the dense foliage, swatting away mosquitoes and avoiding patches of quicksand-like mud. His GPS device beeped softly, guiding him toward his destination. But as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor, the device suddenly blinked out. Jack frowned and tapped it a few times, but the screen remained blank. Great, he thought. Just what I needed. A dead GPS in the middle of nowhere. He decided to press on anyway, figuring he could retrace his steps once the sun rose again. After all, he had enough supplies to last a couple of days. As he walked, he noticed something strange about the terrain ahead. The ground seemed unusually flat, almost too smooth to be natural. Curious, he pushed forward, hacking at vines with his machete until he reached a clearing. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. There, partially buried beneath layers of dirt and vegetation, was something metallic. At first glance, it looked like a large rock, but as Jack knelt down and brushed away some of the moss, he realized it wasn't rock at all. It was smooth and cold to the touch, with faint grooves etched into its surface. Whatever it was, it didn't belong here, not in this remote corner of the jungle. Jack stood up and took a step back, his mind racing. Could this be some kind of ancient artifact? Or maybe the remains of a crashed plane? He snapped a few photos with his camera, trying to capture every detail. The object stretched far beyond what he could see, disappearing into the earth like the tip of an iceberg. It was clearly man-made, or at least not naturally occurring, but who would build something like this so deep in the jungle? As he continued examining it, Jack spotted another section jutting out nearby. This piece was larger and more angular, with sharp edges that gleamed faintly in the fading sunlight. A chill ran down his spine. Something about this discovery felt wrong, yet thrilling at the same time. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled onto something extraordinary. By now, the light was fading fast, and the jungle was growing darker. Reluctantly, Jack backed away from the mysterious object and headed toward a nearby riverbank to set up camp. As he ate a quick dinner of dried fruit and jerky, his thoughts kept returning to the strange metal structure. Who, or what, had put it there? And how long had it been hidden beneath the jungle's embrace? Little did Jack know, this was only the beginning. The next morning, Jack woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the soft rustling of leaves. The jungle was already alive with activity, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the strange object he had found the day before. It wasn't just curiosity driving him now. It was something deeper, a pull he couldn't quite explain. After packing up his camp, he grabbed his machete and headed back to the clearing. When he arrived, he noticed something he hadn't seen in the fading light of the previous evening. The metallic structure wasn't just scattered pieces. It was part of something much larger. As he moved around it, carefully cutting away vines and brushing off dirt, the shape began to take form. It was enormous, stretching farther than he could see, its surface smooth and unbroken except for faint lines that seemed to divide it into sections. Jack's heart raced. Whatever this was, it was no ordinary artifact. He spent hours working at it, uncovering more and more of the object. By midday, sweat dripped down his face, and his arms ached from swinging the sheet, but he didn't stop. The more he revealed, the clearer it became. This wasn't just some random piece of metal buried in the ground. It was a ship, or at least part of one. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Ships didn't belong in the middle of the jungle. How had it gotten here? And who, or what, had built it? Jack stepped back to take it all in. The ship's design was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its surface was sleek and polished, almost futuristic. There were no windows or obvious entrances, just seamless panels that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. He ran his hand along the side of it, feeling the cool, smooth surface beneath his fingers. It felt alien, not in the sense of being otherworldly, but in the way it seemed completely out of place in this wild, untamed environment. As he examined it more closely, he noticed faint markings etched into the metal. They weren't letters or numbers. At least, not any he recognized, but symbols that looked deliberate, as if they carried meaning. Jack snapped a few pictures, knowing he'd need to study them later. For now, though, his focus was on finding a way inside. If this really was a ship, there had to be an entrance somewhere. By late afternoon, his efforts paid off. Hidden beneath a thick layer of moss and vines, he discovered what appeared to be a seam, a line where two sections of the ship met. It was subtle, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. Jack pressed his hands against the metal, trying to push or slide it open. But nothing happened. Frustrated, he pulled out his flashlight and shone it along the seam, hoping to find a latch or button. Still nothing. Just as he was about to give up, he heard a sound, a low hum that seemed to come from deep within the ship. Jack froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Was it his imagination? He held his breath, listening intently. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the air, and sending a shiver down his spine. Then, without warning, the seam began to glow faintly, and the two panels slowly parted, revealing a dark opening. Jack hesitated, staring into the abyss. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to leave this place, and never look back. But curiosity won out. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer, shining his flashlight into the opening. The beam illuminated a narrow corridor lined with strange patterns that glowed dimly in response to the light. The walls were smooth and cold, and the air smelled stale, as though it hadn't been disturbed in centuries. For a moment, Jack considered going back to his camp to grab more supplies, but something told him this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If he left now, he might lose his nerve, or worse, someone else might find it before he returned. Steeling himself, he stepped inside, his footsteps echoing softly in the silence. As he ventured deeper, the corridor seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of him, twisting and turning in ways that made it hard to keep track of where he'd come from. Suddenly, the hum grew louder again, and the glowing patterns on the walls brightened. Jack spun around, his flashlight trembling in his hand. That's when he saw it, a shadowy figure moving quickly at the edge of his vision. It disappeared before he could get a good look, but the sight sent a wave of fear coursing through him. He wasn't alone. Jack stood frozen, his flashlight beam shaking as it swept across the corridor. The shadow he had seen was gone, but the feeling of being watched lingered heavily in the air. His breathing quickened, and for a moment, he considered turning back. But something stopped him, a mix of fear and determination. He hadn't come this far to let his nerves get the better of him. Taking a deep breath, he tightened his grip on the flashlight and moved forward cautiously. The corridor seemed endless, curving slightly as it stretched into darkness. The glowing patterns on the walls shifted faintly, almost like they were reacting to his presence. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the ship was alive, watching him with unseen eyes. Every step echoed eerily, making him hyper-aware of every sound. He tried to focus on the details around him. The smoothness of the walls, the faint hum that resonated through the air. But his mind kept drifting back to the shadow he'd seen. What was it? And why had it vanished so quickly? As he rounded another bend, the corridor opened up into a larger chamber. The space was dimly lit by the same glowing symbols that lined the walls, casting an otherworldly glow over everything. In the center of the room stood what looked like a control panel, its surface covered in intricate designs and buttons that pulsed faintly with light. Jack approached it slowly, his heart pounding. This wasn't just a random structure, it was a ship, fully intact and possibly functional. But who had built it? And where were they now? Before he could examine the panel further, a soft noise caught his attention, a whisper-like sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. Jack spun around, shining his flashlight into every corner of the chamber, but there was nothing there. Still, the whispers grew louder, overlapping in a language he didn't understand. It wasn't angry or threatening. It felt more like curiosity, as if whatever was speaking was trying to communicate. "Who's there?" Jack called out, his voice trembling. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a figure stepped out of the shadows near the far wall. Jack's breath caught in his throat. It was humanoid, but not human. Its skin, or what passed for skin, was a shimmering silver, and its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. It moved gracefully, almost floating, and stared at Jack with an expression he couldn't read. Jack instinctively took a step back, raising his flashlight like a weapon. "Stay back," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The creature tilted its head, studying him intently. It didn't seem hostile, but its presence was unnerving. After a moment, it raised one hand and pointed toward the control panel. Jack hesitated, unsure of what to do. Was it trying to tell him something? Or was it testing him? Summoning his courage, Jack nodded slowly and turned back to the panel. As he examined it, he noticed that some of the symbols matched the ones he'd seen outside the ship. Maybe they held a clue to understanding this place, or even communicating with the creature. He reached out tentatively and pressed one of the glowing buttons. Instantly, the room came alive with light and sound. Panels on the walls slid open, revealing screens filled with strange data, and the hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath his feet. The creature stepped closer, watching him closely. Jack glanced over his shoulder, half expecting it to attack. But it remained still, its glowing eyes fixed on him. Whatever it wanted, Jack realized he might be the only one who could figure it out. He swallowed hard and turned back to the panel, determined to uncover the secrets of the ship, even if it meant facing the unknown. Jack stared at the glowing control panel, his mind racing. The ship was alive with activity now, its systems humming and lights flickering in response to his touch. He felt a strange mix of awe and dread. This was far beyond anything he had ever encountered. The creature stood silently behind him, its glowing eyes fixed on his every move. It didn't seem threatening, but its presence was enough to keep Jack's nerves on edge. He pressed another button, and one of the screens lit up with a cascade of symbols. They were similar to the ones etched into the walls, but arranged in patterns that looked like some kind of language. Jack frowned, trying to make sense of it. He wasn't a linguist or a scientist, but he knew this was important. If he could decipher even a small part of it, he might be able to understand what the ship, and the creature, wanted from him. The creature stepped closer, its movements fluid and deliberate. It reached out and touched one of the glowing panels, causing the symbols to shift and rearrange themselves. Jack watched in amazement as the screen displayed what looked like a map of stars and planets, connected by lines that pulsed faintly. Was this a navigation system? Had the ship traveled across galaxies? The thought made his head spin. "Are you trying to show me something?" Jack asked, glancing at the creature. It tilted its head again, as if considering his words. Then, without warning, it placed its hand on Jack's shoulder. A surge of energy coursed through him, warm and tingling, and suddenly images flooded his mind. Vast spaceships moving through the void, alien worlds bathed in strange light, and beings unlike anything he'd ever imagined working together in harmony. It was overwhelming, but before he could process it all, the vision faded, leaving him breathless. When Jack opened his eyes, the creature was gone. He turned around, scanning the chamber, but there was no sign of it. For a moment, he wondered if he had imagined the whole thing. But the ship was still active, its systems running smoothly, and the map on the screen remained unchanged. Whatever the creature had shown him, it was real. Determined to learn more, Jack focused on the control panel again. He pressed different buttons cautiously, watching how the ship responded. Some activated lights, while others caused parts of the walls to slide open, revealing storage compartments filled with objects he couldn't identify. One compartment held what looked like tools, their shapes sleek and unfamiliar. Another contained containers marked with the same glowing symbols, though Jack couldn't tell what was inside. As he worked, Jack began to notice a pattern. The ship seemed to react differently depending on which buttons he pressed, almost as if it was learning from him or testing him. He wondered if the creature had left him here to figure things out on his own. Maybe it trusted him, or maybe it simply wanted to see what he was capable of. Hours passed, and Jack barely noticed. He was so absorbed in exploring the ship that he forgot about the jungle outside, about the danger he might be in. But then, a loud noise echoed through the chamber, a deep mechanical groan that made the floor vibrate. Jack froze, his heart pounding. Something was happening, and he didn't know what. The hum grew louder, and the lights in the room dimmed slightly. Jack looked around, trying to find the source of the sound. That's when he saw it. A section of the wall was sliding open, revealing a long, narrow passageway. At the end of it, he could see a faint glow, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. Whatever lay beyond, it seemed important. Taking a deep breath, Jack grabbed his flashlight and stepped into the passageway. The air felt cooler here, and the walls were lined with more of the glowing symbols. As he walked, the pulsing light grew brighter, drawing him forward. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew one thing for certain. This ship held secrets that could change everything he thought he knew about the universe, and possibly humanity itself. Jack moved cautiously down the narrow passageway, his flashlight beam cutting through the dim light. The pulsing glow at the end grew brighter with each step, and the air felt heavier, charged with an energy that made the hairs on his arms stand up. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being led somewhere important, though he didn't know if it was by choice or design. The ship seemed alive, guiding him forward, as if it had a will of its own. When he reached the end of the passage, he found himself in a large, circular chamber unlike anything he'd seen before. The walls were covered in glowing panels, each displaying shifting patterns of symbols and images. In the center of the room stood a pedestal-like structure, its surface smooth and metallic. Hovering above it was a sphere of light, pulsating gently like a heartbeat. Jack approached it slowly, his footsteps echoing softly in the silence. As he got closer, the sphere reacted to his presence. It brightened slightly and emitted a low hum that resonated through the chamber. Jack hesitated, unsure of what to do. Should he touch it? Was it safe? Before he could decide, the creature reappeared, stepping out from the shadows near the edge of the room. Its silver form shimmered faintly in the glow of the sphere, and its glowing eyes locked onto Jack's. The creature gestured toward the sphere, then placed one hand on it. Instantly, the light grew brighter, and the symbols on the walls began to shift and rearrange themselves. Jack watched in awe as the panels displayed scenes, images of distant planets, vast oceans, towering cities, and strange creatures unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was as if the ship was showing him its history, its journey through the stars. Then, something unexpected happened. The sphere projected a holographic image into the air, a map of Earth, but not as Jack knew it. The continents were outlined, but there were markings across the surface, glowing points scattered across different regions. Some were clustered near oceans, others deep in deserts and jungles. Jack realized these might be locations of other ships, or perhaps something even bigger. The creature pointed to one of the glowing points, then to Jack. He frowned, trying to understand. Was it telling him to go somewhere, or was it asking for help? Jack shook his head, overwhelmed. "I don't know what you want," he said aloud, his voice trembling. The creature tilted its head again, studying him intently. Then it reached out and touched Jack's forehead. A flood of sensations washed over him. Images, sounds, emotions. He saw flashes of the ship traveling through space, landing on Earth long ago, and burying itself in the jungle to hide. He felt the loneliness of the creature, its longing for connection, and its hope that Jack could help. When the vision ended, Jack stumbled back, gasping for air. His mind raced with questions. Why had the ship come here? What did it need from him? Before he could process everything, the creature stepped away and pointed toward the exit. It seemed to be urging him to leave, to return to the world outside. But Jack hesitated. He didn't want to go, not yet. There was still so much he didn't understand. Still, the creature's expression, or what passed for an expression, was firm. It wasn't angry, but it was clear. Jack had seen enough for now. Reluctantly, Jack turned and started back down the passageway. As he walked, the lights in the ship dimmed behind him, as if the vessel was powering down. By the time he reached the entrance, the hum had faded, and the jungle was silent once more. He stepped outside, blinking in the sunlight, and looked back at the ship. The opening he had entered through was gone, sealed shut, as if it had never been there. Jack stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of everything. The ship, the creature, the visions. It all felt like a dream, but he knew it was real. Whatever the ship wanted, whatever role he was meant to play, he couldn't ignore it. Taking a deep breath, he turned and headed back toward his camp, determined to figure out his next move. The jungle stretched endlessly around him, but for the first time, Jack felt like he wasn't alone. Jack returned to his camp by late afternoon, his mind still reeling from everything he had seen. The jungle felt different now, quieter, as if holding its breath. He sat down on a fallen log and stared at the ground, trying to piece together the fragments of what had happened. The ship, the glowing sphere, the visions, it all seemed too vast, too impossible to comprehend. But one thing was clear. He couldn't walk away from this. Whatever the ship wanted, it had chosen him for a reason. As he sat there, lost in thought, he heard a rustling sound nearby. At first, he assumed it was just an animal moving through the underbrush. But then a voice called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" It was soft and hesitant, unmistakably human. Jack stood up quickly, grabbing his machete instinctively. He wasn't expecting anyone else to be out here. From behind a cluster of trees emerged a woman with short brown hair and dirt-streaked clothes. She looked exhausted, her backpack slung over one shoulder and a water bottle clutched in her hand. When she saw Jack, her tense expression softened into relief. "Thank God," she said, lowering her guard. "I didn't think I'd find anyone out here." Jack lowered his machete, but kept his distance. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously. "My name's Lisa Carter," she replied, stepping closer. "I've been tracking reports of strange activity in this area. Lights, noises, that sort of thing. I didn't expect to run into anyone, though." She glanced around nervously, as if expecting something to jump out of the jungle at any moment. Jack hesitated before speaking. He didn't know whether to trust her, but something about her demeanor seemed genuine. "I'm Jack Dawson," he said finally. "What kind of activity were you looking for?" Lisa hesitated, as if weighing how much to share. "It sounds crazy, but people have talked about seeing flashes of light deep in the jungle, and some claim they found metal structures buried in the ground. I'm a linguist. I study ancient languages, and I thought maybe it was connected to some lost civilization or artifact." Jack's heart skipped a beat. She was talking about the ship. Did she already know? Or was she just guessing? He decided to test her. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you what I found," he said carefully. Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Try me." For a moment, Jack debated keeping quiet, but something inside him pushed him to trust her. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, not with skepticism, but with curiosity and determination. Slowly, he began to explain everything. The metallic object, the hidden ship, the glowing symbols, the creature. Lisa listened intently, her eyes widening as he spoke. When he finished, she let out a slow breath. "That's incredible," she said finally. "Do you think it's alien?" "I don't know," Jack admitted, "but it's not human. That much is clear." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "We should go back," she said after a pause. "If this ship is real, and I believe you, it could change everything we know about history, technology, even life itself. We can't just leave it." Jack shook his head. "It's not that simple. The ship sealed itself off after I left. I don't even know if we can get back inside." "Then we figure it out," Lisa said firmly. "Together." Her confidence gave Jack a sense of hope he hadn't felt since discovering the ship. They spent the rest of the day preparing, gathering supplies, mapping out their route, and discussing what they might face when they returned. As night fell, they set up a small campfire and ate quietly, both lost in their thoughts. The next morning, they headed back toward the site of the ship. The journey felt shorter this time, as if the jungle itself was guiding them. When they reached the spot, they found no trace of the entrance Jack had described. Frustrated but undeterred, Lisa examined the ground closely, searching for clues. "There has to be a way," she muttered. "This ship chose you for a reason. We just need to figure out how to talk to it." Jack nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. With Lisa by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant confronting the unknown once again. Jack and Lisa spent hours searching the area where the ship had been, but no matter how hard they looked, there was no sign of an entrance. The jungle seemed to have swallowed it whole, leaving only faint impressions in the dirt and patches of flattened vegetation. Frustration bubbled inside Jack as he paced back and forth, his mind racing for answers. How could something so massive simply vanish? Lisa, on the other hand, remained calm, her sharp eyes scanning every inch of the ground. "There has to be a trigger," she said finally, breaking the silence. "Something that activates the ship. You mentioned pressing buttons inside. Maybe there's something similar out here." Jack nodded, realizing she was right. If the ship responded to interaction, then perhaps it required some kind of external input to reopen. He grabbed his machete and began clearing away more vines and moss from the surrounding area, hoping to uncover another hidden mechanism. Lisa joined him, brushing away dirt with her hands and inspecting the ground closely. After nearly an hour of work, Lisa let out a small gasp. "Jack, look at this." She pointed to a section of earth that seemed slightly raised compared to the rest. It was subtle, almost invisible, unless you were standing directly over it. Kneeling down, she ran her fingers along the edge, feeling for anything unusual. Her hand brushed against what felt like a groove, a narrow line etched into the ground. "This might be it," she said, excitement creeping into her voice. "Help me dig around it." Together, they worked quickly, scraping away layers of soil and roots until the outline of a panel emerged. It was rectangular and metallic, just like the sections of the ship Jack had seen before. Lisa pulled out a small pocket knife and carefully traced the edges, looking for a way to open it. When nothing happened, Jack pressed down firmly with both hands, putting all his weight into it. For a moment, nothing moved, but then, with a soft click, the panel slid aside, revealing the glowing keypad beneath. The symbols on the keypad matched the ones they'd seen inside the ship, glowing faintly in the dim light. Lisa leaned closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied them. "These patterns, they're not random," she said. "They repeat in sequences. Maybe it's a code or a language." "Can you read it?" Jack asked, glancing nervously at the jungle around them. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "I can try." Lisa replied. She reached out hesitantly and touched one of the symbols. Instantly, the keypad lit up brighter and a low hum filled the air. Encouraged, she pressed another symbol, then another, piecing together fragments of meaning based on their shapes and positions. Each press caused the hum to grow louder, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. Suddenly, the earth trembled, and a section of the jungle floor began to shift. Dirt and leaves fell away as a massive hatch rose upward, revealing the dark opening of the ship once again. Jack and Lisa exchanged wide-eyed looks, their hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. They had done it. They had found a way back inside. Without hesitation, they stepped into the corridor, their flashlights casting beams of light onto the smooth walls. The glowing symbols flickered to life around them, reacting to their presence just as they had before. As they walked deeper into the ship, the atmosphere grew heavier, charged with an energy that made their skin tingle. When they reached the central chamber, the pedestal with the glowing sphere was waiting for them. This time, however, the creature appeared almost immediately, stepping out of the shadows with its silver form shimmering faintly. It approached Lisa first, tilting its head as if studying her. Then it turned to Jack, gesturing toward the sphere. Lisa stepped forward cautiously. "I think it wants us to use the sphere," she said. "Maybe it's a way to communicate." Jack nodded, though his stomach churned with unease. Together, they placed their hands on the sphere, bracing themselves for whatever came next. A surge of warmth spread through their bodies, and images flooded their minds. Scenes of distant worlds, advanced technology, and messages written in symbols they couldn't fully understand. But amidst the chaos, one thing became clear. The ship had been waiting for them, for humanity, to prove itself worthy. As the vision faded, the creature stepped back, its glowing eyes fixed on them. It wasn't hostile. It was curious, hopeful even. Whatever happened next would depend on them. Jack and Lisa stood frozen in the chamber, their hands still resting on the glowing sphere. The visions had left them breathless, their minds buzzing with fragments of information they couldn't fully process. Images of alien worlds, towering cities, and strange beings lingered in their thoughts, but one message stood out above all others: trust. The ship and the creature were asking them to prove that humanity could be trusted. The creature moved closer, its silver form shimmering faintly in the dim light. It raised one hand and pointed to the walls, where the glowing symbols began to shift and rearrange themselves. Patterns emerged, forming what looked like a map, but not of Earth. This was a map of the stars, with lines connecting distant points across galaxies. Jack stared at it, his heart pounding. Was this the ship's journey, or was it showing them a path forward? Lisa broke the silence first. "It's giving us something," she said softly, her voice trembling with excitement. "These symbols, their instructions, may be coordinates." Jack frowned, glancing between the map and the creature. "Instructions for what? Where do they lead?" "I don't know yet," Lisa admitted. "But if we can figure it out, we might be able to unlock more of the ship, or even communicate with it." The creature gestured toward the pedestal again, clearly urging them to act. Lisa stepped forward, her eyes scanning the symbols on the walls. She pulled a small notebook from her backpack and began sketching the patterns, trying to make sense of their meaning. Jack watched her work, feeling both awe and unease. They were standing on the edge of something monumental, something that could change everything they knew about the universe, and possibly humanity itself. As Lisa worked, the hum of the ship grew louder, filling the chamber with a steady vibration. Jack turned to the creature, studying its expression, or what passed for one. It seemed patient, almost serene, as if it had waited centuries for this moment. "Why us?" Jack asked aloud, though he didn't expect an answer. "Why now?" The creature tilted its head, then reached out and touched Jack's arm. A wave of warmth spread through him, accompanied by fleeting images. Humans working together, building, exploring, learning. It wasn't just showing him potential, it was offering hope. The ship believed in humanity's ability to grow, to rise above its flaws. "Jack," Lisa called, breaking his focus. "Look at this." She held up her notebook, pointing to a sequence of symbols she had copied. "I think these are commands for the ship. If I'm right, we might be able to activate something." Jack nodded, stepping back to give her space. He trusted her instincts, even if he didn't fully understand what she was doing. Lisa approached the pedestal and pressed her hand against the glowing sphere. The symbols she had drawn began to appear on the walls, glowing brighter as the ship responded. The hum intensified, and panels along the walls slid open, revealing screens filled with data and diagrams. Suddenly, the chamber was bathed in light as holographic projections sprang to life. They showed detailed schematics of the ship, its systems, and even its history. Jack and Lisa exchanged astonished looks. This was more than they had hoped for. It was a treasure trove of knowledge. But as they studied the projections, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The ground vibrated slightly, and the lights flickered. The creature let out a soft sound, almost like a warning. Outside, the jungle came alive with movement, branches shaking, leaves rustling, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps closing in. "They're coming," Jack whispered, gripping his flashlight tightly. Whatever was approaching, it wasn't friendly. The ship had awakened something, or someone, and now they were in danger.